Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Tonight's show, we got Ethan Indigo as the guest, and he's got a presentation for us tonight. So it's very nice, and it's a very special opportunity to actually have like somebody from the Occult Rejects as well do a topic or a presentation. And I very much appreciate this, Ethan. But before we remind everybody who Ethan is, let me introduce my co-host for the tonight. We got Judith the Loon. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
I am happy to be here. I'm so excited about this presentation, Ethan. I can't wait. Thank you for having me, Nick. And everyone else, you could find me on X, YouTube, and Spreaker as the Loon, and you could catch my weekly brunch every Sunday.
Hell yeah. Go check it out. And thank you again for coming, Judith. Always enjoy having you here. Thank you. And Ethan. So, Ethan, for people, maybe, I don't know how they wouldn't know who you are by now, unless they just started listening to the show in like the last week or two, maybe. If they don't happen to, if they happen to not know who you are, please remind them and let them know where they can find all of your books as well, please, sir.
Well, I'm a Tai Chi practitioner, and I wrote a book about sacred geometry of meditation. That's my most well-read book, and I've written several other books, the Tao of Thoth, the Matrix of Four, the Fourth Initiation among them, which I'll be kind of delving into ideas related to and from these books tonight. I write articles frequently. In fact, this idea is from an article I recently shared on occultresearchinstitute.org. Please do check it out. And I appreciate anyone who would like to follow me on YouTube. Trying to expand that, but I share ideas on Facebook and Twitter also frequently. And please give me a follow. And I also appreciate any communication. So I appreciate people reaching out. And yeah, you got to be a little bit obsessive to write, right? I feel like, and some of the things that I delve into tonight, I've really been looking at variously for quite a while now. But when I found this equation, the signification of it all kind of struck me immediately. So I'd like to kind of break down a little bit of what's involved with this simple equation, this metaphor in mathematics, if you will. I'll break down the numbers and the kind of divinatory relationships and sacred relationships too. So as we kind of touched on before the show, the metaphor of mathematics, I feel like is an inspiration towards individuation, ascension, and the initiation process that one has without the fetters of other modalities. I feel like it's an inspiration towards, dare I say, initiation. And we're going to cover tonight the occult, of course, and esoteric ideas and the metaphysical and sacred geometry and numerology and spirituality, religion, and mathematics. And each of those words that I just brought up, I think, trigger people. And in a sense, the word occult, it kind of demonstrates how things have been occulted, because often if I bring up that word, people are triggered in a sense that they want to avoid further discussion of it. And that reaction to that word shows you, in effect, how a lot of things are occulted. For we live in a time where everything is available to us. The mysteries are available to us. And
remember one time I had called myself an occultist. I think it was on the show, on somebody else's show, and like even the I guess the person having me on, the host, was like totally taken back that I used that. And I remember one other time I had used it on like an Instagram post I think it was like somebody had me and another podcast that we were being cool, but we're having a conversation. And I mentioned something. I said, "Well, I'm an occultist, so this is my stuff or whatever." I mentioned that, and they were like, I forgot what they said, but they were like, "I've never heard of anybody actually ever call themselves that." I said, "Well, I don't know what else to call it. I mean, I don't know. It sounds normal to me."
Well, yeah, it's fascinating to me, the responses I've gotten recently in passing, like, "Oh, hey, what are you up to today?" "Oh, I'm doing a podcast." "Oh, cool. What are you doing a podcast? What on or about?" "Oh, I've been doing a lot of stuff on this great podcast, The Occult Rejects. They got occult." And they, like, you can see like their whole mindset change, and it just demonstrates how people have been affected by occulted ideas. They don't even look into it. In fact, they avoid them. Even the term esoteric, which means indoor teaching or internal art, it also is befuddled with the meaning of befuddling stuff. Understand, and it's just too niche and general. You don't even want to look at it. It's esoteric. And certainly sacred has a really bad kind of assumption behind it, and numerology as well. But as we can see here, one of the great founders of the Western world philosophy, who brought and science and spirituality and geometry and sacred geometry, is Socrates. And Nick, we can start the excuse me, I said Socrates, I meant Pythagoras, um, with the Pythagorean group, which really founded the Platonists and so on and so forth. He famously remarked, "All is number," and also he has this whole um, you know great kind of reference for anyone that was Pythagorean and Pythagoras, but also, yeah, they were kind of cuckoo because they thought that there was in effect, a quality to quantities, right? And but I would say that a lot of physicists and scientists and certainly mathematicians would agree with the sentiment that all is number. And I'll read here what is the Pythagorean prayer. Most of the things that we know about Pythagoras, of course, were written about him, and we have tidbits of Pythagorean ideas. But it's important to recognize how much they valued the four in the form of the Tetractys. Bless us, divine number, thou who generated gods and men. O holy, holy Tetractys, thou that containest the source of the eternally flowing creation. For the divine number begins with the profound, pure unity until it comes to the holy four. Then it begets the mother of all, the all comprising, all bounding, the firstborn, the never swerving, the never tiring, holy 10, the key holder of all. And so in this we can see the relationship of 4 and 10, which is rooted in the Tetractys. But also, I think 4 is super valuable as a set to reach understanding and comprehension. Let's go to the next one. And famously, I think the 4 elements are used as. Here is an important one that we see unfolding in modern science, and these ideas or these forces and substances interact with each other. But we can see here that 4 is used as a module of understanding and comprehension of reality. This may not be the perfect set of 4 to observe everything, but it is a super efficient start, as are many sets of 4. Okay, and the next one. Thank you, Nick, for
Yeah.
helping me with the images.
Did this
No.
idea 4 ever help you with? Did that influence your kind of stuff with the fourth initiate at all?
It exactly is all this. And then I found this equation. So I wrote the fourth initiation before this, of course, and
Oh,
then
right.
found this equation and the matrix of 4. I've found that it is a super useful tool or set of tools that helps me have situational understanding of potentials, right? And it also, again, like with the prior set of 4, it helps conceptualize reality. And I think that is what the 4 elements is kind of putting forth in effect. And we can even see it, we break down that word, it means God mind, right? And so godliness affinity or being in correspondence with godliness is understanding. Element is it's right in the words. And so the 4 elements certainly have all sorts of layers of interpretation, but one is a way to comprehend reality. Let's go to the next one.
You know, it's
And
another
there's
wild way, just to add, I guess, to even, I guess, other systems of 4 that have some pretty deep thought to it. Empedocles, when he looked at these, he called them roots, not elements. And it was rather deep stuff on this stuff. And again, it was kind of like another system of 4 that, brought together a whole. So,
yeah, well, it makes entire sense. And even our whole way of perceiving mathematically is through 4, and or the duality of polarity in effect with the 4 operations of arithmetic. And of course the Tetractys celebrates the 4 dimensions of geometry that we'll get to. And of course
No, I
sure.
had a question about the previous slide. Is there a particular reason why water and earth is switched?
oh, I think that's correct, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Wait,
are they wrong? Oh
If
yeah.
yeah,
you
what
if
water
you're
should have
looking at
the.
the well,
I just was
actually,
getting images off online to
okay.
Yeah,
right.
which
I
one
was
is
going with
which?
the directions because if you're going from
Oh,
air would
oh,
be
okay.
east and then fire
Yeah.
would be south, then water is usually west, yes, and then earth would be north. So those two are switched. I was just wondering, is there any particular reason?
No, I just quickly got that image for the 4
Okay.
elements.
All right, yeah. I see what you're coming at. If we were to be doing the ritual of the pentagram right now, those directions would be all off. Is that what you get? Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, for sure. That's funny. Because at first I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's not exactly what Libra. That's not what it looks like in Libra E. No, Libra O." Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ethan. Go ahead.
No, it's good. It's good to enhance the information. So the next one shows another set of 4 that modern scientists use uh, to understand the 4 forces, right? So again, are there different ways to look at things? Always, but 4 provides scientific and sacred geometry and philosophical ways to observe things. And let's go to the next one.
I like how you have electromagnetism on here. You may have listened to it because you do seem to actually, comment, or you say things to me that makes me think you actually listen to the show. So, mechanics of magic. I think I covered on the brainwave show that even those
I
like
think I
reading,
did see that part, maybe.
it's all it is.
I need to catch up with your work, though, Nick. You've been doing so much. I honestly
Well, there's
need
been
to
a couple
catch
of
up.
times you've said things to me about like specifics about certain shows, and I was like, "Oh crap, okay, this is my man. Listen to it." Even with like the brain waves, the alpha, the beta, the gamma, and all that stuff, all that is showing,
Right.
believe it or not, which I never knew until like I started looking into it, is like a fluctuation between the electromagnetism. Basically, there's like, you know, the plus and the minus. You know, there's a magnet and there's some sort of energy, and then like the friction, or like, I guess, like, depending on how far apart they are or how closer they are, it creates like a different kind of hertz or whatever rhythm. Well, it's just basically all you're reading is the distortion of the distance between the electromagnetism fields. And I'm like, yo, that is fucking crazy that it like basically like they even showed something else now that they found has electromagnetism going on in it. I can't remember what it is, but it was to the point now where they're thinking that might actually be like one of the basics of life. And I was like, I've been like fucking been saying that for how long now? When you look at the occult, that's exactly, in my opinion, that's what I mean. If you want to explain the pillars, one's a magnet and the other one's protective. Yeah, so yeah, but I'm glad that you included that, because that is rather interesting how when you like, you know, like I said, with the brain waves and other things that I've looked at, how much electromagnetism is actually behind shit that's going on. All right,
Right. And yeah, I mean, it's arguably the demonstrated in the very yin yang symbol, electromagnetic forces and flows, right? And here again, another fourfold dynamic to comprehend reality. It keeps occurring, whether it's scientific or metaphysical, as we'll get more into. But I just wanted to bring up, for those who are just listening and not looking, plasma, gas, liquid, and solid states of matter. Again, sacred geometry, in effect, could be, or is, I should say, exoterically measure of Earth, and esoterically, I would say that it is measure of Earth and time and space and mind and any number of other things that are metaphysical. So let's go to the next one here.
Okay.
And this is from Plato's Republic. Arguably, the divided line, maybe I should say, essentially, the divided line is a fourfold measure of consciousness and how consciousness measures reality. And it is at root of the allegory of the cave, arguably the most foundational and most influential philosophy there is. And essentially, the real and the reflections of the real, and there is the reflections and the abstractions off of that. For instance, with the third and fourth are often more hard to distinguish, but mathematics is an insubstantial thought form, and algebra is a reflection off of that insubstantial thought form, right? But we can, many people have noted that within this fourfold divided line is phi, the golden ratio. We can go on here. One way of coordinating the ideas within it is a phi in twofold, essentially.
You know what I thought was really interesting? The way you were talking about, like, if the image is real or not. And I was like, you know, it's like such a weird, like, you know, sometimes I wonder when you see spellings like this, you know, is there something behind it or not? But like, think of a movie reel. You know, and you're saying, is this image real or not? Like, movie reel isn't spelled the same. It's, you know, obviously REEL, but it's not real at all. It's a representation. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's like when you were just saying if the image is real or not. And I'm thinking of a movie reel and how that's actually fake. And the word is so close to the other, you know what I'm saying? The opposite of that. I don't know. I just find that weird sometimes. It's just a stone thought I just had.
No, great point. And into the kind of cultural reflection of this duality that's kind of harder to perceive than the real and reflections of. There are this insubstantial, non-real, real, R-E-E-L, as you point out, and then a reflection off of that is even less substantial. Not that movies are not worth anything, but something that is a reflection off of that might be a show about movies, or a show about the characters in that movie, right? It's a reflection of a reflection. It gets farther and
That
farther
is bugged
away
out when you think
from
about it
the
like
real.
that. Damn. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like a mirror reflecting an image to something. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Ethan.
Okay, and so here we have the Tetractys, what the Pythagoreans and Pythagoras celebrated in that 4 and 10 prayer. And we see this is a celebration of sacred geometry. That is among the many secrets of this symbol. It is the 4 dimensions of geometry. Up top, we have the point, symbolic for the first dimension of geometry, the point. And the next level down, we have 2 dots, which is the minimum number of points required for a line. And on the next dimension below that, we have 3 points, which is the minimal number of points for a flat surface. And below that, we have
Oh shit! You froze.
I use this image. Where did I freeze up?
When you were about to talk about 4.
The bottom level is made up of 4 points, which is the minimum number required for a solid, right? And so the idea of sacred geometry is celebrating creation, because geometry is the measure of creation. And we can see here in the center, there's this hexagonal hexagon and hexagon star, and there's the center point, which is corresponds with the circumpunct, in effect. But again, there's many different sacred geometry ideas going on there, but among them you can see basically the 4 dimensions of the elements in that hexagon, right? And this Tetractys is not just in the past as far as its influence, because it really was part of the foundation of the biblical story that we get. Let's go to the next one. And in the Bible, the Tetragrammaton is the biblical is the biblical formation of the Tetractys, right? And this is a 4-fold name for God. And I would propose more specifically, it is not the hidden word of God, and it is more specifically the hidden logos, or rather lexicon. It's the hidden grammar. And we can even see that in the word tetragrammaton. It literally says for grammation. But we don't say grammation, we say grammar. And we can also see there are points and lines, and you can imagine circles and spheres in the other formation of it. But most importantly, we see the 4 and 10, which when people play around with numbers, they of course might multiply 4 and 10 and get the 40. But one important aspect, not to get too off track, but this adds up to 72 in Hebrew gematria, the name of God. And so let's go to the next one. 72 is the number of hours in 3 days, which we have Jesus having and a whole astrological symbolism having to do with the 3 days. But 72 is essentially 3 days of 3 sets of 24 hours, right? And within 72 hours is 4,320 minutes. So I would propose that Jesus is a sacred geometer. And I list out here a bunch of relationships with 70 and 72 to kind of get the significance of this in traditional speaking. So I'll just read out real quick. 70 days in traditional mummification process, 40 days spent in natron, the salt that would dry out the mummified bodies. El and Asherah were known to have 70 children, which is 72. Depending on the way it is, one notes the translation, the Septuagint from Alexandria, the first Bible, was 72 translators. Some say 70. Also, 72 is 1/2 of 144, a super significant base number for the 144,000, or 12 times 12 in the Bible as well. 72 is the number of years it takes to travel 1 degree in the great year. And of course, I mentioned the 4,320 minutes in the 72 hours. And 4,320 divided by 108 is 40. And we know the same kind of base number as the 4,320 minutes in 3 days, healing frequency, a healing tone. It's a number at its base that is in the Sumerian Kings list, and it also is 400,000, 432,000, excuse me, is the number of years in the Kali Yuga. And another fascinating little side quest, 144,000 divided by 108 is 1,333.333. And again, the 13, Jesus and his 12 disciples, and the 33, Jesus supposedly lived to be 33 years. All these are kind of biblically oriented numbers. And I don't mean to get too much on a side quest there, but just that the 3 days is
Oh, we lost you at the 3 days when you went to go explain the 3 days.
Oh, I was just saying, I just wanted to note that it corresponds with the 4,320, almost as if part of the geometry or understanding time and space and so forth. So I hope that wasn't too off track, but let's go to the next one.
I was even thinking of the Goetia with the 72 demons.
Oh, right. This comes from, in Exodus, there is 3 sentences, each with 72 words, and they combine them to form what is known as the 72 names of God. And this is where the 72 seals of Solomon later arrive from and correspond to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So here we have the 72 names of God, which Nick, as you eloquently point out, this is where the sigils of Solomon originate.
Wow.
And again, it's just one of those numbers that is super eloquent. I didn't mention it's 2/3 of 108, right? There's 2 sets of 36 in 72, and in 108 would be one more 36. Jin is here, the man.
Holy shit, Jim, what's up?
Sorry guys, I just came off of my own live,
I
but I
know.
wanted to support you guys, especially because Ethan and I were talking about like how we might talk about aid and the matrikas, and that's like my favorite subject. So, I'm not a math guy, but I do love the magic numbers. So, thank you, boss, for having me. Of course,
Please,
and
thank you.
Judith, of course. I love being. It's a great, little round table over here. So, I really just came on to support Ethan. So, thank you guys so much for having me.
I'm so grateful that you're here. This, as I kind of mentioned, I understand the synthesis of these amazing ideas, but you have dug into the well of one of the upcoming ideas deeply and profoundly. So I'm so glad you're here. I was just mentioning the 72 names of God from the Bible correspond with the 72 sigils of Solomon, or keys of Solomon, excuse me. Let's go to the next one here. This is another fourfold dynamic of understanding consciousness and reality, right? And of course, this is one of the, if not the oldest symbols on the planet, and there's no word for it. You just write it out like that. And it's in a duality of polarity describing our states of consciousness: wake state, dream state, deep sleeping, and deep awakening. And the fifth, the number 5, is the obscuration, the sea of Mara, the samsaric, influences that blind us to our true potential. And so, but what is significant and important is the fourfold dynamic. Let's go to the next one here.
Can I just say something quick, Ethan?
Please,
Is that
please.
it's really interesting that the 5, you're saying that that's the Maya layer. So it's kind of like the inverse of Kabbalah in a way, where you're like going through the physical densities to like a higher spiritual octave, the 5th layer, Pardes, which is really like turquoise or like empty diamond, like lightning. But this is the kind of the opposite, but it is also related. So you could say that it's like
I think
different
it's
views.
the same and contrasting. Sorry.
No. Don't be sorry. That it's like almost like the inverse, but I'm not saying like the transgressive inverse. It's kind of like it unfolds it differently. It's like, because like a more dharmic way is like that Maya is the light. So the outer luminosity of things, where the Kabbalistic idea is that the inner luminosity is of primacy. But Dharma also says the same thing. So it's interesting because it's like the husk can be illuminated. This is a more Lurianic concept, like a very advanced Kabbalah idea, that the husks themselves can be understood as, the klipas can be understood as illuminant, and also can be transparent if we come into that 4 states of consciousness.
Yeah, beautiful.
I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's some of these modalities I think are powerful just in that they correspond with other sets of 4 pertaining to mind and comprehension of reality. This quote, I think, helps for me really reveal Om by revealing its contrast, Hum. And I think it's beautiful that it's in the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, which is 4 words, 6 syllables. But it kind of reveals, I think, in a sense, that the universal in the individual, and the individual in the universe, if you will. I'll just quote here. Om is the infinite, but Hum is the infinite in the finite, the eternal in the temporal, the timeless in the moment, the unconditioned in the conditioned, the formless as basis of all form, the transcendental in the ephemeral. It is the wisdom of the great mirror, which reflects the void as much as the objects and reveals the emptiness in things as much as the things in the emptiness. To see things as parts, as incomplete elements, is a lower analytic knowledge. The absolute is everywhere. It has to be seen and found everywhere. So the hum and the om are related conceptually. I find that understanding that is helpful.
The 6 and the 4 are also 10.
Let's, sorry?
The 6 and the 4 are also 10 because Buddhism obviously resolves the paradox of numbers
Right.
with the 1 and the 0, right?
Great
So
point.
even that, there's like an even though that's kind of exoteric, the 6 and the 4, but I think most people reciting like that mantra, even though that's like a very exoteric mantra, like very like sutric, any normie can do that mantra. I don't think that they would necessarily count the syllables. So even though I'm saying it's like exoteric numbers, like the 6 and the 4, I think that's sort of my thinking of magic now is like it has to happen in our perception. So if we understand that there are 6 and 4 and that's 10, then we can say, oh, then the paradox of numbers is resolved. But if we're not thinking about it, like in the sense of like we're not trying to like penetrate the deeper mysteries of what that is, I think that we maybe forget or we never
And
really come to higher understanding.
yeah, beautiful, Jen. And from what I understand, and this corresponds with other traditions too, I found there is an activation word to this Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, and it is Shri, right? That's the activator enunciation, if I'm not mistaken. Jen might know better than I.
Well, the only thing I would really add, Ethan, is that like the Om for Buddhism actually came much later. So people would associate it with like the Buddhist mantras by maybe the 7th or 8th century. But before that, they wouldn't have used the Om because that was considered to be a Vedantic sort of attribute of the like from the mind. But then Buddhism had a bunch of like scholars that came later, like how Nick always talks about, like you have to kind of look and know the lineage and trajectory and the historiography of things. You can't just like if you're looking at it from a really traditional Buddhist perspective, yeah, you wouldn't have the Om. But because we had like thinkers and like philosophers and practitioners that started including it and started reconcile the paradox of the mind, like how do we bring the mind, this Vedantic idea of like this eternalist mind, how do we start relating it to our very esoteric practices, which is of course mantra. So I would say like that would be my one interesting note about Om Mani Padme Hung, but I think you're totally right in your inclination to say like Hung is a super important bija. It's not necessarily the Aeonic bija as I would think of it, but it's so important. It's when when Nick does sorry Nick, I have to use all the keynote that you do for the show, but when he does the eclipse logo or the lightning flash logo, that's exactly how you'd visualize it in your mind. You would see the lightning coming descending down from the dark sky onto the turquoise water, and then what Buddhism would do is you would actually unfold it by going back upwards. Like the Hung, you're imagining the actual letter, but the letter is the lightning strike. And the letter also has flashing colors. So Hung would flash adamantine or silver. Silver is a more normie color way to understand, but really it's not silver, it's like flashing metal. And so you bring it down, descend it into your body, and then you kind of bring it back up. So the space remains pristine. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard like a lot of Buddhists talk about that, Ethan, like you want the mind palace to stay pristine. So that's exactly what that's for. So Hung is like the bija that sort of makes all the bijas work. It is the lightning flash, if you want to say that.
And to add to, I brought this phrase too to add to the interpretation of the Tetragrammaton, because within it the symbols have this same idea. Om is the infinite, and Hum the infinite in the finite, with the points and windows, if you will, in the tetragrammaton. So let's go to the next one here, and I swear we're going to start getting away from this polarity and the four, but it's just really interesting how it plays out repeatedly, the same dynamic. Okay, so here's where we get into some of the more sacred geometry ideas. The Pyramid of Giza is built in a way that it has pi and phi, and also guess what size it is in relation to the Earth. It's 43,200 sides of the Earth. And there's that number again, right? 3, 2. So it's the most kind of sacred geometry construction on the planet, people say. But within it is the 4, 3, 2. Let's go to the next one, unless anyone has any input.
Well, I know the Golden Dawn guys don't like this, but I always say like that 432 sort of number. I know Nick's laughing. The number magic, but okay. But if you are the witness to that, you are the one, like as the perceiver of those things, then that is also the 10. I just want to say that. And like there's an idea in Plotinus that's not my material at all. I'm like it's totally stealing from like Ethan and Eros and like all the discussions I've listened to. This is not something that's coming from my knowledge base at all. But I'm just saying there's an idea in Plotinus where he agrees. So, the 10 is always there. There's always a hidden one, right?
10, right. Well, and here I start to bring up here the 40. And the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. The Bible uses so many, I would say, initiatory time periods of 40 days and even 40 years. And this is possibly there are pre-biblical reasons for this. I pointed out that the Egyptians would immerse the mummification process by way of 40 days in the natron. Was often, again, for the elite people. They had different ways to do it later on that were less expensive, but the original process was 40 days in natron. The Hebrews also had a tradition where after birth, a woman was considered, forgive me for using this term, unclean for 40 days if they had a boy and 80 days if they had a girl. I think what they mean, though, is that the woman should not have, sexual activity for 40 and 80 days, right? But again, we see that this is a time period of transformation. No matter if it's from birth or to the next world in the Egyptian conceptuality. Sets of 40 in the Bible where Jesus comes. Lent is 40 days. Jesus visited after he rose for 40 days. There's different 40-day processes that he went through to get past the worldly ways. Moses had similar kind of idea going on, a 40-day initiatory rite. So in a sense, 40 might be symbolic of the time period it takes for one to change oneself for the better. Modern psychologists point out that if you repeat things for 40 days, it's a new habit. So interestingly enough, so 40 is I think the symbol of initiation and individuation, as we'll see more here. Let's go to
Thank
the next
you.
one. Oh, and I mentioned some of these, but more references to the Old Testament concept of the 40 and the 80. We can go to the next one.
I wanted to touch
Please,
on this a
please.
little because it's ironic, and I don't know if they knew it back then, but her being unclean and not having to have basically sex during that time, that's usually when after giving birth, those are the times where a woman is most fertile and most likely to have another child, like back to back. When you have, please excuse me for using the term Irish twins, that's usually where that term come from, because they usually get pregnant within that window. They're more fertile for some reason during that time.
Interesting.
That is true. That is true.
That
I've seen
seems
that
like
happen to a lot of people when I sorry to interrupt, but I even
No,
saw
no.
that with a lot of people, even either growing up, like other families around me, or happening to some of my friends. But yeah, it would be like they it's just like, come on, didn't you know that already? Like, whew.
there probably is a biological component to all of this. Like in the
Sure.
sense, like when like when Nick does the eyeball stuff, it's like the same thing. There's like a direct biological layer to all metaphysics, at least at one layer.
Yeah,
Agreed.
one of
Right.
many. Yes,
One of many, right? It's not the only one, but it's a really important one, and one that maybe the sort of the part that gets the most obfuscated. It's like what Judith is saying is like there's a conventional wisdom, like a kind of quote unquote folk wisdom, but also a scientific wisdom that backs it up. But I think that people totally don't know. I think a lot of people actually don't know.
that's why I like covering that shit. Because I don't think it's funny how you have to jump on Golden Dawn people, but they seem to be the ones that, I don't know, from what I've talked to, bringing up like a lot of science stuff, even though they're friends with academics. They didn't seem to like the science stuff backing up a lot of stuff. And I was like, to me, it's, I think maybe when I do that, some people maybe think it takes away, like, I guess, the magic, but I don't think it does. I think, if anything, you're proving it more.
Oh, I think it enhances it in my mind. But I guess
Exactly.
it's all how you look at it.
Yeah. But yeah, I do agree. I don't think a lot of people look at it like that, which is exactly why I'm trying to jump on that type of stuff. So I do think there is something there, and I think it's highly, highly important. So
You think about it, how many things were seen mystical and occultish back during the Renaissance that science has since proven to be true and have the data to back it?
yeah, you are right. You're totally right.
It also proves, like, I think, Nick, what you're like, I'm not trying to speak for you at all, but I think it actually proves a lot of wisdom science. Because if you can actually relate it to material things, then you have to also accept that's maybe some of the quote unquote mysticism that they're talking about. Maybe that is real too. And I think actually, I'm not trying to pick on anyone's system or any, people who've been on the show or anything like that. But I do think that there's a kind of obfuscation of magic in general. And I think that people tend to prefer their own ways of obfuscating and their narratives that they use to sort of contain like what they think the masses should know about wisdom science. Like I think that's very strange to me. That's a very like strange way to sort of go through the universe. But I like chaos magic, so people can say I'm Discordian or whatever. But I don't know. I just find like those kinds of ways, like where you don't acknowledge that there is like a material element to all of these things. Like, then I would actually question if they believed in anything. Like, do they have a higher metaphysical truth? Because if you can't accept that there are multiple layers of reality, like, are you even a magician?
Well, I think even science, going back to even the whole reason behind it, is like, I think trying to figure out or explain the something you don't understand. I mean, and that's the whole fucking thing behind occultism.
But when it comes down to it, it all comes down to the numbers. Because on both sides, the numbers are valuable and the numbers show the truth.
That is interesting too. Yeah.
And I mean, isn't there so many ways to empower magic by way of correspondence, right? And when you get the quantity being reflective of a certain quality too, it's just another kind of addition to that process, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's numerous references to 40 being an inventory processes. And we can go to the next one.
Okay.
So maybe the greatest initiatory construction is referenced as the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza. And of course, their measurement system was not feet, and likely they didn't know meters, although people argue about it, but they definitely had cubits. And the base, the sides rather of the pyramid are 440 cubits, which there's the 4 again. And the height is 280 cubits, which Osiris tradition corresponds with rebirth and the 28 for, guess what, 4 weeks, 4 7-day sets. And that is when grains would start growing again, the rebirth process that was his agricultural aspect. And this height and base width, actually, it turns out that it has phi right in it, which is 1.618, the golden ratio. And so the golden ratio is 1.618, and the Fibonacci sequence corresponds with the golden ratio with variance. And I would say a lot of numerological ideas are not necessarily exact, but present the idea nonetheless. Present the valuable lesson or symbolism nonetheless. And here we can see 440 is 1140s, and 280 is 740s. There's the week again, but it's more for the time of a lunar month period, a month, right? The 28 days. And we can move on unless anyone had anything. Here we have at the foot of the Great Pyramid was found an ark. The ark is symbolic for the vehicle that one goes into the afterlife with. And there's the sacred scarab of Egyptian cosmology. And in the boat, there are 7 figures. And if you look very closely, great job, Nick. If you look very closely on the left, there's actually the 8th figure there is a little snaky.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
And so the 8 is the 4 pair. And this happens in Egypt and elsewhere. So let's go to the next one. And the scarab is most spoken about as being celebrated for its relationship with the rising sun, because it would transport little balls of manure up and over and around, and they related that to the sun. And the scarab was transporting the sun. That's one way that the scarab was sacred with the Egyptians. Possibly there might be other reasons, as we'll get into.
That's interesting.
So, and that's carried by Ra. And I've learned a lot. Shout out to, on YouTube, this guy Tahuti. I've learned so many great things about Kemet from him. So this here is a depiction of the 8 prime forces of the Egyptians, the Ogdoad of the Neeters, from where we get the word nature more than likely. And this is again 4 pair, and not just 8. So, and 8 is a Fibonacci number. I'm not sure that's why it's entirely so provocative and celebrated widely, but it is one of the numbers of the Fibonacci sequence when you start at 0. So let's go to the next. Interestingly enough, we just looked at a vessel in Egypt that contained 8 figures, and the Chinese character for boat is an 8-person vessel, which is, I think, provocative that it has a correspondence there. And of course, in the Bible, the famous story of the 40 days and 40 nights is done by way of 4 pairs of people. Noah and his 3 sons and their wives are in the boat as 8 people. So I think that's just an interesting relationship.
Yeah,
Let's go.
I like that.
Unless anyone has any input, we can go to the next one.
Sure.
So another, we just looked at the 4 pair of the Ogdoad relating to the 8 elemental gods. The same thing again happens, or at least a mirroring contrast happens in the West. The East, when we have the 2 main energies that are actually 4-fold within the yin yang. And we have the Bagua, which are these 8 elements that are the foundation for the I Ching, which is a divination tool and exploration based on 8 times 8. So these trigrams unfold and connect and link with other trigrams to form 64 combination possibilities. And it's one of the oldest still published books on the planet, if not the oldest. And it's really a primal exploration of energies and used in divination processes. And there it is again, the 4-fold leading into the 4-pair fold of the Bagua symbols, and then leading into the 64, as we'll see, unfolds quite a bit, and all in the same direction towards comprehension of consciousness. It's often suggested that the swirling snakes on the staffs that are associated with Tahuti and maybe Moses, and here we have Fuzi and Nuwa, that these spiraling lines might reflect the sacred geometry number that is the 1.618, the golden ratio. But here we see Fuzi and Nuwa given credit for the invention of the 8 trigrams and the 64 hexagrams. And here we see in their hands the sacred geometry tools, the compass and square. And again, this is from the East, not any Western Freemasonic associations. They had the compass and square because they were divine geometers, if you will. And this is kind of the iteration, the Taoist iteration of Tahuti and Thoth, of course. We can go to the next one.
Something I wanted to say before, when you were talking about, I think you were talking about the 8 or something. Oh yeah, with the 8 on the, I guess on that Egyptian boat, a barge, bark, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Tahuti, Tahuti would be associated with number 8, or at least I would think the OTO or like thelemic practice
Absolutely.
with Mercury. And in Libra Resh, he is always standing at the prow whenever you do Libra Resh, which is mimicking the Egyptian great barge in the sky.
And
So he is always in
beautiful.
that, no matter what direction you're looking at and praying to.
Yeah. And in
Sorry,
ancient
Ethan.
Egyptian
Just let me ask Nick
cosmology.
a
Oh,
question.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry about this. Nick, when you do that ritual, do you face east?
You'll start off there, I think, in the morning. Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting to me. Just because obviously I relate it to my own system and then think about it, how to break it down from there. But yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Like the solar principle of the rising sun, which is not actually like in Tantra, we differentiate the morning sun and the evening sun. So I don't know, but that seems, and like even the midday sun, some people will say in tantric astrology or Jyotisha that it's actually Venus is our midday sun at the sort of like that one point. So at noon, it's really the diamond of Venus that shines down on us. But the morning sun
Oh,
would be
that's interesting. The diamond of Venus, you said?
yeah, that's how they would think of it. Or even me, like I've described it that a couple times before.
Because the morning for like sunrise or uprising sun or whatever, however you're saying it, and that's with Ra. But then at noon you'd get Hathor.
Well, that
And
makes sense, right?
yeah, with the Venus. Yeah.
Yeah.
She would even fall on sometimes I think she would be in Crowley 777, a female deity you could use for Netzach. So
It makes sense. She makes total sense to me.
Yeah. I used to use her all the time because of Tahuti. I just figured that made sense if I wanted to use Netzach. A lot of times I used Hathor for that because I was already, predisposed to Toth and Egyptian stuff.
Yeah. That does make sense because that is the lower world polarity. It's between Netzach and Hod. So that's like good magic. That's exactly what you'd want to do.
Mm.
It's like activate both the nodes so then you could draw because both of the nodes are all the nodes too. It's not just we just tend to conceptualize them as different, but really the whole tree arises from Hod. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the light from Venus that enables like the Hod to reflect the tree upwards. Anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail that.
Jen, I have to ask you a question. When
Sure.
you're talking about using Venus, are you using her in the east?
Sometimes they like when okay, so she'd be considered like the apex, but this is something really interesting about Tantra. I don't know if this directly answers your question. The Venus can be considered to be the falling star of Tuesday of Mars. So there's a lot of tantric things that could happen. Like you could schedule like rituals or pujas or whatever for Friday or not Friday, Tuesday evening. But then you would also say Venus is the rising star, the morning star of Friday. And
Okay,
Mars is the evening star of Friday. So you'd have like that really interesting like Gevra Netzach connection.
That's really interesting. I wonder if that's another reason for the flashing colors. Because you know how like they do the flashing colors, they do correlate with each other, Mars and Venus.
Yes. 100%. Even in that example that like a lot of the GD people use, like of the rose. Yeah, that's a really good example for that interaction.
Yeah.
It's not even like a rose with thorns is much better at describing that interrelationship than even it is in terms of like astrological, like planetary astro herbalism is what I was trying to say. Like there's better herbs for just Venus. But when you're using the rose, you're really describing the connection between the two.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Ethan. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. It's all great. I was just going to add that another relationship of Tahuti and 8 was in creation stories related to the Ogdoad and the Neeters, but also Hermopolis was the city that Thoth worship was central, and the 8 Neeters as well. And of course, there's the 8 immortal aspects of the Egyptian soul as well. So we can go to the next one. And here's the 64 hexagrams. The 8 times 8 create 64 potentials. And it is very much a mathematical construct. I'll read a quote here from Terence McKenna, who became obsessed with the I Ching. Now, of course, it's a divination tool, but it's also, I think, um, in reading it, it provides, I think, primal understanding of energies. But the mathematics of it are amazing, despite it being practiced as a divination tool for millennia now. I'll read this quote here. The bottom line is the people who pursued this understanding of time achieved as sophisticated a relationship to time as the Western relationship to matter, expressed through our ability to trigger fusion and fission. And it is not necessarily mystical. What I did was entirely mathematical. I think true understanding can be communicated and formally described with mathematics. And that's what we have here. We are on the brink of a fusion of Western science with quote unquote Eastern mysticism. Nothing mystical about it except that we call it mysticism. But the fusion of these two viewpoints is going to give us a complete understanding of the universe, of space, time, matter, and energy. And some of the amazing math I'll break down real quick. We have the 64 hexagrams. 64 times 6, the number of in a hexagram, is 384. This is essentially 13 moon cycles, which would be 383.9 days. So it's, I think, not necessarily coincidental that it is a way to understand time and energy the same way that in the West we look at the table of elements to understand matter. The I Ching is as efficient of a system to look at time. And also 384 multiplied by 64 equals 24,576, close to the time and years of the great year, the astrological cycle. So some really neat concepts going on with this 8x8 64 in terms of measuring time and mind. And we can go to the next one unless anyone had anything to say.
I like what you said, that last rhyme that you did, Ethan, time and mind, because that is exactly what it is. It's the Bina coming into the Yesod. It's like the
Dope.
mind
I'm
arises
glad.
in the 9 and also in the 8, because the 8 is
Right.
like the conceptualization of that, of whatever the world is. But the primordial mind is really in the 9. And so that's also like another parallel that I've also found, like when I don't really discuss the I Ching, that's definitely like your material. But for me, like I do think about it obviously sometimes. And because we have the
Right.
idea of the time king, the Mahakala, he is 9, but he expresses himself 8 times, 8 dances. That's exactly how they describe it. Just like Gurdjieff, like
Oh,
8
interesting.
dances into the world. So, I mean, there you have 72 right there, as well as 17, as
Right.
well as a sort of like Toth, or the Hod, Yesod, and Bina connection. Like all of those things are what really create time, or at least our perception of time. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And I think this is why a lot of Western magicians really love the I Ching, because I think it's so close. Like, I think once you're deep in metaphysics, you can start to look at it and you don't even have to fully understand the Chinese way of thinking about it. It just kind of unfolds and makes sense. And
Yeah.
obviously there is something very binary code about the
Mhm.
like the hexagrams, and they
Each
clearly
one
like
is a binary system. Pardon me.
no, don't apologize at all. I mean, I shouldn't. It's your episode, but I do find that to be
This is great.
very, it's deep, right? Like there's a deep metaphysics to the I Ching, and I think a lot of people recognize it.
And it corresponds with, as you'll when we come to it, you can get into more. It corresponds with the 8 matrikas and the 64 yoginis, right?
Well, that's the whole thing, and I think that that's like a perfect way to like bring it around to that. Is like, why does this Chinese system correspond to this Indian system that arose totally differently, independently, quote is supposedly air quotes independently,
Who
and
knows? Yeah.
at totally different times in totally
Mhm.
different places? Like it's kind of interesting, and they're both
It's
pausing this
fascinating.
resolution of paradox of 64. So the 6 and the 4. So maybe you could say it's the Tiferet and the Hesed. Well, that's kind of interesting. You think about it in like Aeonic terms, like Hesed, as we've often talked about on this like in this show many times, that is kind of like one of the key points of like moving the cycle is like the embrace of Hesed. Now, how do you enact it? I don't know, but the idea is there. And like bringing it into balance into Tiferet, obviously that's a very Aeon of Mot sort of way of thinking, right? Like as Crowley said, like Horus is at Gevra, but Gevra and Hesed are not actually two different Sephira. And I wonder if he even wrote that to see, like, to test a lot of like the newcomer OTO people to sort of say, like, yeah, I'm going to put it on this pillar of severity. And in the Sephira that they often translate as severity, I personally wouldn't use severity. I would use strength. I think that's better. But, you know, it's the tension between Hesed and Gevra that really make the whole tree work. That's the primary polarity. So you could
Yeah.
almost say that Hesed and Gevra, they have to be interacting at all times. So you could easily say the sun or Horus or whomever, you could easily place him at Hesed. It doesn't even require like that much conceptual difference or that much Kabbalistic difference.
And the whole orientation, to add on to the polarity of it, of course, with the hexagrams, there's the polarity of the 2 trigrams in each of the hexagrams. But also, if you look at them, they are each in pairings as they unfold. The first 2 are pairs. The the third and fourth rather are pairs, so on and so forth. They are all kind of complementary polarities. And there's some more neat 8 and 64s as we'll see here. I think we can go to the next one. So this is the formation of the I Ching in reference to the Egyptian measurement system. And so I just put that there for interest. The Egyptian measurement system, we discussed cubits earlier, but this measurement system is referenced for grain. But interestingly enough, it goes into parts of 63 64ths, and it is also used to measure consciousness and reality. Let's go to the next one. Here, I think, is the Eye of Horus, and here we see parts that represent 63 64ths to use for measurement of grain, but also to measure consciousness. And smell is 1/2, and you can see it in the eye there. That actually is the hieroglyph for nose. And sight is 1/4, and it is the pupil, and that's of course the hieroglyph for eye. Thought is the brow, and of course that is the hieroglyph for thought, the brow. And hearing represents 1/16. and that is the hieroglyph for ear, of course. And taste, we have here another spiral. Of course, it's not the golden ratio spiral, but it beckons to it. This is symbolic for a wheat sprout. And finally, we have touch, 1/64th, and this is symbolic for a peg or nail, touching. And so I shared a link in the chat. I'll share it again. And it is a National Institute of Health reference and just to kind of depict how it's used as not only the Eye of Horus, but it actually can depict the inside of our brain, right? So it's a measure of consciousness physically and metaphysically, and it's the contrast of 64 parts. It's 63/64ths, if you will. Always with the Egyptians, there's the one missing, right? This is the imperfection, the missing part, whether it's a capstone or as we see here. And we can go to the next one. And again, the 64 hexagrams and the 64ths, all about measurement of consciousness. Here we have a star tetrahedron, two tetrahedrons interfaced, and these are what I was saying. The minimum number for a solid is the 4 points. Well, there they are, two of them coming together. And I share that because another 8 times 64 idea unfolds in the next couple that a researcher, Nassim Harriman, put together. And it's interesting, we can go to the next one, that it unfolds in the same mannerism. Eight-part shapes come together and create this sacred geometry symbol with 64 tetrahedrons. 8 times 8, 64 once again. And within that is the tree of life, so many different designs and sacred geometry lessons are within that symbol. And we can go to the next one. And here, of course, probably the most esoteric game. I heard someone describe it as the tarot of board games. Rather, it's like playing cards to tarot. Chess is to board games. And of course, it is 8 by 8. And in an esoteric sense, it is the game where the individual tries to win over the negative attributes, the base consciousness, and enlightenment, and the authentic self tries to win over. And 64 parts, the 8 by 8. Also, I guess it's worth noting there's the 8 pawns. People say that relates to the 8 parts of the soul from Egypt. But also, interestingly, if you take away the masculine and feminine properties of the king and queen there, and then note that there's a positive and negative on each side with the knight, rook, and castle, there's only 4 different types of pieces, right? And chess can be traced back to India, where it was originally played with 4 players of 8 pieces. So just interesting. It really represents the internal battle that is individuation and ascension and initiation in the chess game.
before I don't know, Jim was saying something about with the eighth sphere, maybe, or Hode. But I always kind of looked at like that was where like sometimes where the hero's journey kind of like really starts on the if you want to look at it that way. And even with the 8x8, if you want to look at it like this, that's actually like a perfect example of like what a magical square would look like for the for Mercury. You know, an 8x8 thing like that, and that would again, I mean, be associated with Tahuti. You know, the magical squares or the planetary squares, or Mercury would be an 8x8 grid with
And
numbers that would you would create sigils with.
That's super interesting that you're saying that, Nick, because in the deity who gives the like the game of chess, who supposedly is, but at a secret layer, he is the game of chess. Anyways, we won't get into that, but he gives, we'll say the outer way. He gives the game of chess to humanity. He is the son of Shiva. Shiva, in a more esoteric way, can be understood as specifically the mind. So the mind from Yesod. Where does the mind from Yesod go? Well, obviously it goes over to Hode, right? So that is exactly where the sun, and that is the archetype for Hode, right? Is the sun archetype. It's like the unfinished sun. It's like the more, he doesn't really have a, he's not fulfilled in and of himself. He has to go through Hesed, Gevra, Tiferet to really understand who he is. But at that point, yeah, that's interesting. And like also, I remember this. I took a graphic novel class when I was an undergrad, like 10 million years ago. And I have I'm good at visual things. So the professor asked like a question about like the negative space in a graphic novel, like what is it used for? Well, you can easily make an argument of the chessboard, of like a black and white chessboard, that neither the white nor the black specifically in and of itself refers to the negative space. It's actually all negative space, because there isn't anything that is like, it is only defined by the 8, where the 8 is infinite, right? So it just like would be infinitely expanding, rather than, it's not like the white isn't the base and the black isn't the base, but you could think of both as that. I don't know if that even makes sense, but I just think that there's something with negative space that it's like, how do you define, conceptualize, like to bring it back to Mercury or Hode, like how do you define, conceptualize something that doesn't have like a sort of an end point?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. The symbolism too, develops on that, in that it can be symbolic for the physical plane or the mental plane, right? And often, of course, we mentioned severity and mercy pillars earlier. These are kind of always in place with the symbolism of the pillars as the earthly realm, and interestingly enough, the surrounding outside layer of squares is 28, which is, again, that comes up. There's your lunar month again.
It's interesting. I always thought that Tahuti's path was like 8, 6, 4, and 2. I always thought like the beginning was 2 and the other one was 8, where it starts. That's why I think I've mentioned that a few times when I've seen 8 and 2 put together. And I think Trump had that shit in his texts too. Double 8s and double 2s. Yeah, that's all. Sorry.
We can go to the next one then.
All right. That's really interesting with that board. Glad you brought this up.
And here is the 64 sided star tetrahedron again, and you can see the tree of life in there maybe a little bit more clearly. And we don't have to stick on this one too long. We can go to the next one.
I'll just say about the yantra, like from this view, is that you could easily, like you're saying, Ethan, like the tree is there. It's just like it's even described as splendor, as like light emanating from a gem, depending on what gemstone you use, right? Like if you use a star ruby, well, you can use that. That's very tantric. It's like the light coming through that. And then, so not every spark is a node.
No.
Sorry, I'm done.
No, thank you so much, Jen. And Nassim Harriman, as he was kind of conceptualizing this, he actually compressed the tree of life into a 3-dimensional square with a capstone kind of thing, and putting together 8 of those, and from there found this shape. So it's really from the tree of life is this symbol.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because the tree of life only really came into existence in like maybe the 10th, 11th century as it is that we use it now. But it definitely existed in
Sure.
other things before that, right? Like it definitely, like it's conceptualized differently. I think that's been like my biggest clear pill or like white pill or like whatever, like thinking that like, oh, actually I wasn't wrong after all. Like it actually exists in a lot of other systems and they even understand it as a tree, but they might not present it as a tree. They might present it as like 10 interconnected things, and it's usually 10, but sometimes obviously if you look at the Norse stuff it can be 9. If you can look at the more Egyptian stuff, but I would posit that the Egyptian stuff does kind of touch closer to the 10, but I know that not everyone like feels that it's a satisfactory sort of way to look at it. But no, I think that the tree arises in so many different ways and things, and people have put it together in different ways. There's a Sufi way to do the tree, which is just it's just 10 separate like verses, like little poetic verses
Mm.
that describe one of the natures of the Sephira, and it corresponds very well. Like if you even just understand like the basic of the basic, you could go through that list and be like, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. So it's like about how do you use Hode? How do you use that 8 to conceptualize what you're seeing or what you know to be real?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you kind of ended it with that because I did have an idea from before and I forgot how like I could even like weave it back in. But like when you mentioned Splenda before, even Glory goes along with Hode. And if you kind of look at the tree, like the colors of the rainbow goes from Netzach into Hode. So, well, I mean, I guess depending on which way you're going on the tree, but it seems to go from 7 to 8. And I think like if you're going down, you're getting the colors, you're getting the beauty of Netzach. And I think once Hode does what it does and gives it a name, gives it a context, gives it a story, now you can definitely give glory to it. And now it's definitely splendor because you think it's fucking beautiful.
Right.
At this point, like I even could see how that's even connected to taking an image and giving it depth and giving it a story and a name.
Sorry, I want to say one quick thing. Sorry, I'll be really quick.
Mm.
No, Nick, that was great. First of all, second of all, it ties in with your thing about the twos. How like you would see like 2 and 8 often appear together because you could say that Hokmah is where all the dead stories are, where the stories go to die, like where exactly the corpse, like the Bardo realm, like where all the flux of the words, the old words, they're all there that we don't use, and all the things that we've forgotten, the dead gods, you could even say. That's what exists there. And so we have to bring it in back. We have to either resuscitate, revive the corpse, very tantric, or we create something new, but we can only use the material basis of what has already been in the past. And so that is a lot of like, obviously, if you are or were in the OTO or any of the sort of like orders more like that, and definitely not the more Golden Dawn stuff, but definitely like OTO, Typhonian, maybe even like go left hand path stuff. You are actually more focused on the recreation, but also the rectification. Like Crowley would say, oh, I did the Kabbalah for the Aeon. And just like how a lot of like the Typhonian order uses the Lovecraft mythology, but the Lovecraft mythology also speaks to the Klippas. So did Lovecraft, was he aware of that? I would say he was, because you couldn't not be really aware of it and then just map it out just like accident. Maybe you can, but I think that maybe there's more self-awareness there than a lot of people allow for. What I'm just saying is that I think that the story, you can either do that thing that pagans do, like where they go, oh, I'm gonna reconstruct, I'm gonna do a reconstructionist tradition, or you can do something new, something more like, Gnostic or neo-Gnostic. So I think we actually have more options than what people consider. And I think that's why the 2 and the 8 are really important. It's like, do you want to make something new, or do you want to raise a corpse from the underworld?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We can go to the next one.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the matrikos as you spoke on that, the positive and negative, or rather the kick you in the ass to ascend and protect you nature of them, if I'm not mistaken, Jen, the matrikos.
Yeah, I mean, so their name in Tibetan is Mamos, which is chaos. Literally means chaos. And
There it is.
so, so it's like Eris, like, I love my Peter Carroll. So like, yeah, it is. It's very similar. But it's also very similar to like the Tiamat myths. It's like in like Central Asia, they would consider all of these things to be very interrelated. It's related to the Barbello of like Gnosticism, like the primordial grandmother. She sort of gives birth to the world, but what is left of her? That's really the question that Tantra asks. Not what is left of the world, what is left of her? Well, she is a husk. She doesn't have any blood left to give unto the world because she's birthed it all. So she's like sunken. That's exactly how she's described, or crookback sometimes. So this has a lot of like deep layers to like both Kabbalah and the Klippa. Like if you're listening to it.
Sergeant.
No. So I apologize. I'm going on a lot. I apologize.
No, not at all. I just wanted to make sure I said this before we moved on. Another thing with the 2 and 8 before, I forgot, and I wanted to say too, after you said a few things, even if you want to look at the way the tarot falls on the tree of life, the second path is associated with the magician, which then would have like the infinity symbol on that card, which is an 8. And the magician would even be associated with Tahuti anyway, in my opinion. So you get like that whole 2 and 8 kind of reference again there.
That's a great point. I think that we would have been, I think it was good that you mentioned it, because it would have looked like we didn't know, but obviously we do, or you did at least. No, but I agree with that, because that's the way to that's one of the paths to transform like what Keter actually is, right? And there's the idea that only the magician or the fool, which is on the polar opposite path, it's both of those things are the same card, sort of. But how do you understand like when you come back from your suffer? Well, like, okay, so the first time you fall in, you're the fool.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then the next time when you have to climb back up, you're the magician.
Yeah, see, I feel like before you actually have the experience, like with my experience, like with the whole thing with the eclipse and whatever happens after that, my idea of all this stuff, I mean, I was a complete fool to what really I think it was about. And then I think after you've had that experience, you come back down, back into your meat suit, and now you're the magician because you know the difference between the two. So I think like one kind of goes up the tree, and the magician, I mean, it could be, wrong the way I look at it, but the magician I just see makes more sense coming back down.
I don't think there is. I think it's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a wrong way to view the polarities, because you're talking about two polarities. So you'll have one up, one down. So if you're looking upwards, or if you're looking downwards, that's two different perspectives. That's totally fine. I don't think there's a problem at all.
I've always just kind of looked at it like that in my own experience, for sure. I'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, some more symbols related to this 64-sided tetrahedron. Just interesting.
I will say about one thing about them. Sorry, Nick.
Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing quick about the matrikas. They sort of are the primordial force, the like breath of God. They can take 7 or 8 formations, like Saptamatrika, Ashtamatrika, depends on Nepal or India. Different ideas, right? Like just like we've been talking about, just like Ethan's been talking about this whole night. Like there are different ideas of the cosmology, even within Tantra itself. But what I do think is interesting, of them is that the later on, even though they're the oldest kind of tantra, you could say, is the star goddess stuff that happened in like the forest or the jungle, like away from civilization. Very important idea. Is that later on when they start to reconcile this like mantric, very ferocious tantric worship with more normative ideas of like religion, so it's not just magic anymore, not just like black magic even, maybe you're actually applying some theology to it, is that they actually again increase the number. So they would actually, to sort of, I guess, tame it, you could say, like what Judith was saying kind of resonated with me. Like it all comes down to the number. So why couldn't you use, if you're a magician, why couldn't you use an increase of the number to try and resolve the paradox of the old number? I don't know. Just something I was just thinking about that for the mantrikas.
Yeah, and I got the pictures of the matrikas coming up too. And we can go to the next one.
Sounds good.
Just another depiction in relationship with the flower of life and the tree, and also the coordination, the same coordination as the 64-sided tetrahedron. And here are the 64 hexagrams and their kind of primal energies worth considering. We don't have to spend too much time on this necessarily, but just another of the 64. The I Ching is really worth just reading, if not necessarily for a divination practice, but it is the book of changes, or the book of transcendent transformation, right? Which is the 8 and 64 as we see.
I like to make a comment, and maybe I'm looking too much into it, but I saw it more in the previous image that you showed with the I Ching. It's almost like, if you're into IT, it's like you're looking at code.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. It is mathematical code, and it's actually, people have noted that it was or is a really sophisticated binary code system that would be efficient with computerization, right? It's total binary code, thousands of years before they considered it for mechanical computerization.
I don't know how old you are, but I know there was a point in my young life where they actually, I think it's because of the I Ching, they assumed that out in the East, they already had computers and they were computing because of how close this looks to coding. The only thing is missing is 2 bars to be actually bit code.
Yeah.
What if they were?
Yeah,
what if they were computing? Sorry, Ethan.
They kind of were, really. I mean, their understanding of time and mind through this is as sophisticated as it gets. It's not too much, it's just enough, type of thing. The 64 quotient, rather.
Sorry, it came up too many times in my head. I was like, this can't be
great point.
popping up.
You know, a lot of the Chinese state rituals used to build these kinds of crazy clockwork. I'm sure you've talked about it many times, Ethan, like the clockwork mechanisms. There's no reason to not consider. Okay, well, they would do these like they would do these clocks that would be based on different things like incense, weight of marbles or gold, or different things that would, like, mechanisms that would sort of like,
Sure, okay.
yeah, it's from time measurement or different kinds of measurements of the world. And then they
Right.
would, and then they would write the character, like both the hexagrams and Chinese characters, which obviously have a metaphysical implication, like there's a meaning because they're like they're logographic, right? Like they represent an idea very much in and of themselves, but they also represent like different component words and all these little characters that have meaning, right? So if you inscribe those on precious metals, just because you do it in a primitive way, maybe you are getting a kind of resonance. There is a 20th century philosopher called Leibniz, and he did the same thing, and he was basing his work off like this 14th century guy who was doing the same thing, like inscribing like kind of like words or like symbols, sigils to metal pieces of metal, and then he would like tie crystals to them and like sound. And so it's like it is computing, but it's like deconstructed computing. And then what we look at now is like that they brought it all together.
Yeah, well said. It's absolutely divinatory computation.
No, I think you're onto something with that stuff. Sometimes I mean, I really don't think it's the situation, but just sometimes I do wonder, like, how advanced were they? Like, was some of this stuff actually code? Like, was some of the Goetia actually computer chips? Like, I don't know, even the ciphers and stuff. So some of that stuff, when you get into gematria, is that just code those numbers eventually? I don't know, but I do find like this divinatory stuff. Sometimes I do think, especially this stuff here,
It's so mathematical and like, so that it's hard to believe that it's a divination process.
Yeah, no, I understand exactly what you're getting at there. You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah. One of the things that Terence McKenna pointed out as far as its relationship, Jin mentioned earlier how this all unfolds in our very biology. Well, this symbol represents the 64 codons of proteins that we can digest and utilize in our very life force. 61 and 3 to be particular. But here's another 64 that is our very biology. Worth pointing out. We can go on to the next one. And I touched upon this before, how the 63 64ths have this symbolism to them, and also the exoteric process of grain measurement being their kind of relationship. Before we can move on from this one. And here's an example of a base 4 system that Jin might be much more intimately familiar with. The 4 manas, if I'm not mistaken. But I feel like we've kind of adopted variations of this in the West as well. But we have 4 aspects of mind. Again. Jin, are you more astute with this subject?
Like, I'm familiar with it, but it's not the system that I would use. I would use the Skanda system, but this is a perfectly fine way to describe it. But I just want to point out that the graphic, like, you can think of Kabbalah just like this graphic: 2 polarities, one up, one down. You have a diamond thunder, the Pardes layer, which is
really
represented by
like
turquoise,
that.
right? Then you have a yellow layer, a gray layer, and an orange layer. Like, there's no reason you couldn't even consider this to be the Sephra of Hod right now. I'm just saying, if you're going to cross section it, you could say that. It wouldn't be wrong.
Even the spheres all layers to them as well. So it's very Kabbalistic.
There's the 4 skandhas. You mentioned the skandhas. There's 4 of those, if I'm not mistaken, right?
There are 6, but the 6th one is only when you clear the other 5. So you have to deal with the sort of they can be related to the elements. Like, you can say like the 5 skandhas at least are the 5 sense perceptions or the 5 sense aggregates. So it's like it's all of our own bullshit. So that is what is considered the limiting factor in like just how we understand or perceive the universe to be. But then there's also like the aggregates that also exist outside of us. What are the social limitations that have been placed on this idea? And then that also gets related in an alchemical way. So you relate each one not only to a sense organ like eyes, touch, all of that, but you can also relate it to elemental. So like fire, earth, air, water, and obviously can be mind or can be space. But that's both things, especially for like dharmic religions. So those would be the primary five skandhas that there are different ways that people deal with it. Some people treat it very like magically, like sorcerously, where they imagine the elements and they purify the elements in like a ritual thing. And or some people think of it just like this, like more of this model. And they kind of reconcile it by thinking it through analogically. So it depends. It depends on your system. But what I do think is interesting is like in the skanda system, because we reconcile it with like mostly magically and with elements, that relates so much more to Western magic, right? Because then you're like partaking in the things that you have, the things that the magician is capable of controlling, his spheres of influence. Like, like different people have different elemental affinities. I'm not a like astrologer in any way, and I'm not a person who heavily like I don't put a lot of faith in astrology at all, but I acknowledge that it's the macrocosm, whatever that is, and that it does affect things on the microcosm. But how do we understand that? So that is interesting to me because then we start to relate it to the planets, the planetary correspondences, as you were saying, Ethan, because correspondences, a lot of people don't like correspondences, but there's like 777 for me is like he packs it in too tight. I don't think it should be like so dense. I think it should be like there should be natural correspondences that you make that are easy. And those are the ones that are primary. And then the ones that like the system puts on, like whatever magical or theological system you're using, you have to discern whether those fit or not. Because then I think when you overburden it, people get very lost in the sort of conceptual soup. Is it this bird? Am I going to use this specific feather? What if I don't have that? Well, like, what if you don't have this like exact plant? Like one, like sometimes they'll do that. A lot of Western stuff will be like, you must use this exact thing on this exact kind of astrological correspondence. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it in a way, but I think getting locked in and lost in that, I think that's a big mistake.
So I just wanted to point out for those that are listening that maybe can't read it, that this fourfold system here depicts the emotive base and the ego and the intellectual and the intelligence. So again, just a fourfold way to perceive consciousness. That's interesting. And I think next is a picture of it's interesting that there's sometimes 7 and 8 matrikas, and they give birth to 8 thought forms or lessons of initiation and ascension each. But Jin knows better than I do, but it's just another set of 8 by 8 referencing consciousness and comprehension.
Yeah, they're non-dual. That's really how Buddhism would describe them. They're beyond good and evil. They don't really like the rites that were used, and especially in like medieval and early like 3rd, 4th century, very ferocious. People would not be comfortable with like the things they did now. But then it becomes reconciled. Like I said, if you give them a consort, which is how Buddhism would describe the reconciliation of all paradox is found in the consort. Well, for the matrikas, if you're more of a goddess system person, the consort's obviously can be male. But then there's an additional one. There's the person praying to them or doing the whatever, the practices. So that's the 10 right there. So then you also, by giving them the husband though, you're bringing them into you're not dominating them, but you're kind of allowing them to, you're giving them structure and boundaries. You're kind of bringing them from from space, like chaos. As I said, their names mean chaos. You're bringing them from space, empty space, into time. So you're giving them a definitive boundary. Obviously, if you give them Shiva, the like father god, as a consort, he is time. Like he literally is Mahakala. Like he is the father time. So you kind of are taming them. I guess that was the word I was looking for. So they become less transgressive over time. So you could say that now they're more benevolent, and maybe the Discordians were right in like their sort of praise of Eris in a way. In a way, I'm not just saying speculatively, but yeah, I think that might be right. Is that like because they're not malevolent so much. We kind of all know that the world has like an unstable, chaotic nature, and so we don't necessarily put our preconceptions onto them. We don't say, "Oh, it's evil." Something, institution falls down. Oh, it's evil. Not necessarily. So I think I'm using more a mind layer, but that's how I understand the mantras. But I think you do a great job, Ethan. Like, I don't think I know more than anyone. I really don't. I'm just very niche.
Sure. No, I mean, I know the broad generality of it, but you know it more in depth. So thank you for sharing that. We can go to the next one. Okay, so two of the numbers in this equation, although we've touched on many different numbers, the main ones are 40 and 64. And here we are back at a depiction of the golden ratio, and the golden rectangle is in there too. And everyone, I'm sure, is familiar with this. So, and we can go to the next one. One of the more common depictions of the golden ratio in nature is the sunflower seed spores, how they're arranged to release and pack the most amount of seeds in this spiraling concept, spiraling shape. Many things in nature do reflect the golden ratio near exactly, many things closely. Humans, as it turns out, have probably the most depictions of the golden ratio of any being, really. Nick, I had to find where the golden ratio was in the eye. And we can go to the next one. The way that the cones and rods are packed into the eye is in the same format as the sunflower. They are hexagonal. That's not where the golden ratio is, but it's in the same kind of spiraling packing to get the most reception to light as possible. So the golden ratio is even in the rods and cones of the eye. We can go to the next one. And here's just another depiction of the golden ratio, now connecting to the highly celebrated in among Greeks and Chinese, the pentagram, and within there are angles of 108 and 72 as well, if I'm not mistaken. We can go to the next one. And here is the Fibonacci sequence, how it breaks down in numerology, and it's eventually the Fibonacci sequence aligns with the golden ratio of 1.618. We can go to the next one. This is the Fibonacci wheel. And this is a wheel of 60 numbers. And this was found by a French mathematician, I believe Joseph Louis Lagrange, might have been French, Italian. but it's a series of 60 numbers that the Fibonacci sequence repeats. If you um, break down to the smallest digits of the Fibonacci sequence, you get this Fibonacci wheel of numbers. Each fifth number is a 5. And there are 4 corners where there's a 0. And so that discovery was made hundreds of years ago. Another pattern that wheel is a 24 cycle repetition that was discovered by Jane 108. That every 24 of these numbers equals 108. And then there's a 9, and then there's 108 again. He deciphered. So within the Fibonacci wheel and that depicts the spiral, we can find 108.
That's
I'll
weird.
just say, oh, sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
Yeah, please, please. Yeah.
I just want to say really quick while Ethan's like reconnecting is that the 6 is really important in Tantra. The 6 and the 16 also. Because it's always the deity and his consort, right? So the 6, 7, the 13. You can say that the sun figure also who gives the chest to humanity, he's given the 6th position. So you could even say there's like a natural, the sun, like the hero from start at Hod to finish, which is at Tiferet, you could say that like Tiferet's the natural inclination for that sun figure. And I'm talking SON, not just SUN, but of course there's a, say that's sort of the same thing too.
What's up, Ethan? You back?
Nice. Sorry, I cut out there.
Yeah,
I
good.
was just saying, yeah, that even in the Fibonacci sequence, 108 isn't explicitly there, but kind of subtly, covertly there. Pretty fascinating. So, and it also, I think the 60 is interesting too, because it's the Sumerian system of 12s and 60, right? It might have some significance. And just to kind of point out the mathematics of 108 being in the pentagram is there. The 36, 72, and 108. And that middle triangle is known as the golden triangle, of course. We can go to the next one. Another example, excuse the redundancy, of the golden triangle in there. And yeah, these are just to point that out more efficiently. We can go to the next one. And here is the golden spiral with the numbers. And here is an example of it unfolding in nature by way of branches. We can see it in that as well. And again, it's not in every aspect of nature, but it's in so many. The human skull is also right there. Depending, of course, it varies, but it's right there at the 1.618 ratio. And of course, our arms and fingers and wrists and so on, so many different ways to find it. We can go to the next one. And it's even in space, if you will, Saturn. Now, again, I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but I thought this picture was worth sharing anyway. You see that with the golden rectangle there.
I actually really like this picture for Saturn because in more of the Chinese astrology, Saturn's actually associated with this golden color. The dry earth of the Yellow River. Like when you can actually look this up, like pictures of when the northern plains of China, like north of Beijing, before they're flooded, the earth is cracked and dry always. This is like the way it's even understood in literary terms. And it's always yellow. And then when the waters pour over of the Yellow River, they take on this yellow hue. So that's kind of
Right.
that if you want to assign it like an astrological time, you would say that Saturn represents the time. It's not that this field is necessarily fallow, it's that it's desiccated and dead. And what it requires is the waters to bring it back to life. Like that is very much a Saturnian kind of Binah process.
Beautiful. And we can go to the next one. And here's the scarab again, and which is known to be the golden ratio or golden rectangle, or phi. There it is in the celebrated Egyptian little guy. So the numbers we're dealing with in this mathematical metaphor, this inspiration to initiation of self by self, is the 64 divided by 1.6, and that equals 40. So the 64 matrika yoginis, the 64 hexagrams divided by sacred space and place, which is the 1.6, equals dedication to initiation. And we can go to the next one. Rounding up here, I think there's only a couple more. Some other examples of where golden ratio unfolds. And again, obviously in the pyramid, in the Parthenon, and in different Roman and Greek structures as well. And here's the final little way to conceptualize it. The 64 is divine measure of time and mind divided by or applied to 1.6 for the shortened of 1.618, which is the sacred measure of space and place, the sacred geometry, so to speak, equals 40, inspiration for initiation. So it's amazing how these deep numbers come together in this mathematical metaphor. Thank you guys for
No, thank
listening
you.
to that.
What started that whole rabbit hole for you?
Well, I've been looking at the 64s because of the 8.
Bill, we're losing you there, Ethan.
Yeah. It's getting really bad again. Yeah.
Oh, it's like, oh, you're done. Am I back?
But yes, you're back now. You're back.
Oh, so I and thereby obsessed with the 4 pair or two 8 being 4 pair. So I became obsessed with 8, which also just shows up in so many different cultures in kind of the same ideal. And the 8 Dimensions article is on Occult Research Institute too. And I've long been looking at the 64, but didn't really find a way to explore it in great depth because the I Ching is just a profundity on its own. And all of these are such deep deep lessons and things to explore. But I just kind of found the synthesis of them all and with the fourth initiation, had been looking at the 40 for a long time too. And when I saw that it came together, it just struck me as being really significant and kind of depicting the ideas that I thought were objective, but also kind of thought might be subjective too, in part as we all kind of impart our own view on things. But it just seemed like the mathematical equation pointed to a more objective kind of aspect of this.
Yeah, some just weird stuff that I feel like you made ties with. Like the way you went with it. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's just something up with the numbers, right?
All
Yeah.
magic is in the numbers, like Judah said.
Mm.
This is just the truth. It's just like everybody agrees on this. Like you can be like I'm looking at Judah's hair. That's why it reminds me of Rastafarian, maybe. But they believe like that they do. Like they call it the science of numbers. Like all it doesn't matter Rastafarian or anything. It's like any serious wisdom science. It comes down to the numbers. So I think that that's like the most profound thing. And I think that's also like about Kabbalah. Like, yeah, you can describe it using conceptual things like I do, like colors and planets and alchemical terms, but really it's about the numbers. And that's even like the Nick Land thing, like the numogram. Like, I don't agree with that tree. That's just obviously a tree that he's renumbered himself and made path workings on. But, he preferences the 9. I just think that it's more interesting when we go into the 10.
I can see that. Judith or Jen, was there anything else that you wanted to add or ask or anything? No?
Well, I do have this was in the beginning, and I don't know if this is still relevant, but I wanted to ask Ethan. Okay, a lot of people do shy away from gematria and the numbers and everything else. They're very intimidating to most, even though they're everywhere. Especially with the evidence you showed us. Now, do you think like a movie like Pi didn't help that situation? I don't know if you're familiar with that movie.
What about sorry, you cracked up a little bit at the end. What about Pi?
Do you think that helped people try to shy away from it, or help bring some light to it?
Yeah, good question. Well, there's also wasn't there that uh, Jim Carrey movie of 23, I believe.
That one I'm not familiar with.
It's an excellent one. It's interesting, but he is portrayed as a very much on the precipice of lucidity, and he's very obsessed with. I believe it's 23. I forget now exactly what it is, but I feel like there's two different directions that those movies could influence. Both of those, in effect, one to get people interested in the correspondence, and two to have people belittle it as fantasy and a neat fictional story, but not relevant in materially. I think it could go both ways.
I think you're right about the number 20. Is that SMS? Are you referring to the movie or just the number? I think that's the movie. The number 23 is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
As for Pi, because I never saw 23, Pi I think did show references as well.
Right. No, I remember. I vaguely remember the movie Pi. It's kind of older, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when that came out, but
Yeah,
I
quite
never saw it.
fascinated with the ideas.
I took a
Sorry.
peek. It intrigued me, but it was a lot of work that there was not enough, how can I say, documentation and research done in it. Now we could find more of that research. Well, then again, we didn't have the internet back then too. So
Well, Ethan, thank you, man. And thank you for all the slides too. It was
No,
definitely-
thank you, Nick, for allowing me to put this together. You did the slides, so thank you.
No, not a problem, not a problem. And Jen, thanks for making it, man. That's awesome that you jumped on.
No, I know I
Yes,
spoke a
it's-
lot. I apologize. It's so interesting. It's generative to me, and like I like being in dialogue with all of you, I guess, and I like talking about magic. It's my favorite thing to like. That's like honestly, if I don't need to do that as a living, but I'm just saying I really enjoy it at any rate. So I really appreciate that. Nick will host me, and then obviously Ethan and Judith. Like it's always like great fun for me. So yeah, definitely worth my time. I want to support Ethan as well, like his endeavors on the show, and also just in general. So because like I like the crew, so that's what you do. And yeah.
Thanks. Likewise, thank you so much, Jen. Appreciate you immensely.
Oh, yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, Jen, let everybody know where they can find all your stuff and the Grey Lodge and all that.
Awesome. Thank you. So if people want to find me, the best way is to probably go to YouTube. I know I can't believe I'm saying that. That's so crazy. YouTube.com/@Threshold Saints. You can find both Threshold Saints and the Grey Lodge both on that like under that channel. Obviously, it's non-monetized. I'm never going to monetize it. It's a chaos magic show. That is what it is. And but we have been having a lot of fun on book club, and we are doing our part 2 of our sorceress and sinister traditions of Southeast Asia, which will be called Witsa, which is about Burmese magic. So that will be next week, and then I don't know what book we're going to be reading yet. That's up for consultation. So that will be in 2 weeks. But we just finished Apophenion tonight. So if people want to check that out, it's a Peter J. Carroll book, RIP, that he wrote in like 2011 or 2014. I can't remember, one of those dates. So like Sanre and I discussed this a little bit when we were on Divulgence Pod as a big group. And so this is kind of a radical departure from Pete's work in general. So if people are interested in like a kind of like it was like at times like hard to do this book because it is a little crazy. Like the name Apophenion refers to like so schizoaffective disorder sometimes. So maybe that's why it like invokes like such chaotic energy. But it was a really interesting. I think we dealt with it really well, and people said they really liked it. So yeah, check that out. And thresholdsaints.substack.com is my other main portal, but of course Spotify, Apple, IG, and Twitter. And I'm at Wukong Reborn if you really want to follow my main account. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you. And Judith, let everybody know what's up with you.
First, Ethan, thank you so much. Actually, I hope we gave you some more rabbit holes to go down, and you've actually made me realize, I should speak for myself, made me realize how important it is to actually understand Gematria and understand the numbers and see them everywhere if you want to balance it out between the spiritual and the science. Nick, thank you for having me. And Jen, it's always a pleasure to be on the show with you. And everyone else, you can find me at Spreaker, X, and YouTube as The Loon, and you can catch me every Sunday on my weekly brunch.
Thank you very much. And Ethan, again, thank you. Thank you so much. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff and where they can find your books, please.
Yeah, check out my books on Amazon. The Tao of Thoth and the Fourth Initiation ideas were referenced frequently tonight. And I just really appreciate being able to share this because I feel like there's some valuable inspiration for our own individuation and initiation, if you will. And more articles to come. Check them out on occultresearchinstitute.org and elsewhere. I have, of course, all my social media. If anyone wants to reach out, I'd always appreciate communication. And again, you guys rock. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you coming on, my man. And thank everybody else. Again, Jen, that's what's up. I know you already did your show, so coming on here, I really appreciate it. Judith, thank you very much. And everybody in the chat, that's what's up. That's why we go live. And until the next one, Everybody be well. Later.